Hello everybody, my name is Lars Christensen, I'm an international economist. Today we're not going to talk about economics as such, we are going to talk about the medical cannabis and we're talking about Stenocare. I'm joined by Thomas Skovlund Schnegelsberg, who's the CEO for Stenocare. You have a very new, very interesting IPO and we are visiting, as you can see, Nordnet in Copenhagen. And we're going to talk about your IPO and about your company. But before we do that, I have to deliver a disclaimer. I'm not invested in a Stenocare, but I have a passion for your sector and for what is going on with the medicinal cannabis. And I feel that when we talk about the investors in Stenocare, it's not the typical private investor necessarily. It's also people who has invested with the heart in this sector. Thomas, you have how many investors?
So you're absolutely right that when we went on the spot market, spotlight spot market a year and a half ago, we had actually a lot of investors contacting us saying, we have never tried to invest in a company before, but investing in medical cannabis is something we have to be a part of, because they think, or they were saying they thought it was a really just cause. So they were doing it with their heart. So it's actually interesting that we have a mixture of our 4,000 shareholders where a lot of them actually are there, not necessarily for the money, but for the cause.
Yeah.
And that is actually the same way that the management team in Stenocare feels about it, and the founders, because we started this company to be able to deliver more better days for patients, give them a better quality of life. So that was the starting point. And as you're saying, investors or some of the shareholders actually feel exactly the same way.
But you also have to say that 2020 has been a remarkable, very, very different year from normally, so to speak. Yeah. We are in the midst of a global pandemic. We have had a very significant global economic downturn. The IMF has called it the lockdown recession. We have closed down economies around the world. GDP is going to drop nearly in every country in the world. When I talk to investors, both private investors and institutional investors, I somehow feel that this is very different from a normal recession. We all know that. But I also feel that there's still appetite to invest. People are not scared in the same way as they were in 2008. They are scared about the pandemic, but not necessarily about the economics and the finances. But that being said, Thomas, you're now coming out with a new offer in the midst of this. Why now?
Well, there's actually various reasons.
Yeah.
First of all, we've seen an interesting appetite from investors to invest in small companies like Stenocare. And we've seen it with the Stenocare share over the last couple of months, that the daily trade has been actually pretty high.
Yeah.
So there's an interest and an appetite for that. Secondly, we see a market opportunity in front of us, which is really, really interesting. And the assessment we have in the company is that now is a good time to go and grab that opportunity. We think now is the time because we can do it cheaper than in 6 or 12 months time from now. So we think it's a perfect time right now. But I know we'll probably get back to that in a little later in our talk.
Yeah, and Thomas, just to give some background about the company, it's a young company. It's a young sector. It's a young market. But you have a presentation of your company and of your prospects. So maybe you could turn to that now and give us a 10-12 minutes introduction to what you have in offer.
Yeah. So, and then we can continue.
Yes, please do.
Our conversation. Okay. Yeah. So what I'll do is sort of take you through the highlights of the Stenocare business case and the share issue that we are offering right now to investors and shareholders. So it's important to understand that everything I'm saying, you can read that, of course, in the prospectus that is available on our investor website on stenocare.com. So please go and have a look at that, because that's where you find all the important information.
And Thomas, maybe I could interrupt you and say that if this is a recorded webinar, so if any potential investors have questions and so forth, they can ask the questions below here, wherever you see this, whether it's on Facebook or other social media or on YouTube. Please write your questions below, and you have promised to come back with answers.
We'll go and read them as they come in, and we'll provide an answer. So
excellent.
Hopefully we can address questions that we do not touch on our conversation today.
Perfect.
I'll be happy to do that. So let me give you the highlights of the rights issue that we have right now. Stenocare, we are raising up to 45 million Danish kroner for our ambitious growth plan that we call Stenocare 2.0. That is basically all about becoming a European leader in medical cannabis. We have a unique offer for investors and shareholders. If you buy 3 new shares at 20 Danish kroner each, you'll get 1 free bonus share from the founders of Stenocare. That is equal to an average price of 15 Danish kroner per share. We have also received a pre-subscription from 35 Swedish and Danish private investors, equal to 58% of the share issue. But before we really get into a lot of details about Stenocare, I think we need to understand the opportunity ahead of us. Stenocare, we're looking at the European medical cannabis market. That is a market that is very young, as you were saying. It's a market and an industry that is just about to get started. That means that we have a huge growth potential in front of us. It's not behind us. Only 18 countries have legalized medical cannabis so far. More countries will join in a few years from now, and that makes Europe what we could call a hyper-growth opportunity. In just 4 years, analysts are saying it might be as high as 2.2 billion euros in Europe alone. So that is a really exciting opportunity that is in front of Stenocare and players that enters that market. On this slide, you can also see some of the illnesses that can be treated with medical cannabis. I won't go into the detail right now on each of these illnesses, but the point is really, if you look at Canada and the US, these are illnesses addressed by medical cannabis. And we will expect to see similar patterns in the European market, and therefore it's an interesting opportunity for Stenocare. If you look at Stenocare, we have been identified by the European Cannabis Report as a leader to watch. This is because they identified the fact that Stenocare was profitable in 2018. We were in 2019 as well. We have cash in the bank. We have shipped product to patients. We have established our first company outside Denmark. So we also started the international expansion. So that is a great starting point for the ambitions that we have going forward, that we have been identified as one of very few as a European leader in medical cannabis. So I would like to share with you some of the achievements that the company have delivered over the last 6 months, or 18 months actually, since our IPO in 2018. This is what we call the Stenocare 1.0. I won't have time to go through all of these achievements today, but I'll highlight just a few of them. Apart from we have been profitable, we have been serving patients with prescription-based medical cannabis. We were the first to have licenses from the Danish Medicine Agency to cultivate, to produce, to import, to distribute and sell medical cannabis. We were also the first to have medical cannabis oil products approved. We were also the first to have medical capsule products approved. So we have a strong track record in working with the the health authorities in having medical cannabis approved. We also exchanged the supplier that we had, the Canadian supplier that had troubles last summer. So now we have 2 new suppliers, one from Canada, one from Israel. That is making our supply chain even stronger. We also entered into a strategic partnership with a research and development company in the pharma industry to develop new products for our markets. So these assets, you could call them, in the commercial area, in the regulatory area, in the supply chain area, and the strategic partnership area, is a fantastic foundation for the ambitious growth plan we have in front of us. And that's the plan we call Stenocare 2.0. 2.0 is really making us the leading European brand in medical cannabis. So that's an ambitious plan. So if you look at the timeline so far, Stenocare 2.1, that was the first 18 months of our operation. Stenocare 2.0, that's what is in front of us. So let's zoom in on that for a minute. If you look at the 2.0 ambitions that we have, in this calendar year, 2020, we'll bring new products to market for patients. We'll enter into a new country, so we have not only Denmark and Ireland, but a third country. We'll also start the research and development of our own exclusive products that our competition do not have. In 2021, the improvements and upgrade and investments that we are making with this share issue will be completed here in Denmark, and we'll have a production facility that bring out products that we can have approved for the markets that we serve. In 2022, we'll have a number of strategic suppliers of high quality that we can use when serving our markets. This gives us several abilities. First, it will be a supplement to our own production capabilities and volume, and it will also help us scale our business as we enter more markets and serve more patients, so we can scale up volume as demand is growing. And the last point in 2.0 is really, we would like to enter into as many as 10 new countries, serving more patients in the years to come. So what's the opportunity? So I was saying that we are raising up to 45 million Danish kroner to this investment to realize this really exciting market opportunity. The way we're going to use the proceeds, 50% of the proceeds will be used for the investment in our own production facility to make it even more pharma in its approach and the way it can deliver products both to patients but also to other companies that are looking for high quality, well-documented products in medical cannabis. 40% we'll use for investing in new markets, the up to 10 markets I was talking about, serving more patients, reaching out to millions of new patients all across Europe. And the last 10% will invest in developing exclusive products for Stenocare that competition do not have. So you might say, what's the opportunity for an investor to be part of this exciting opportunity? With this share issue, we have put together an offering. So if you buy 3 new shares at 20 Danish kroner each, you'll get 1 free bonus share from the founders of Stenocare. As I was saying, that is an average price of 15 Danish kroner each. Who can participate? Well, it's available to both new investors and existing shareholders. There's no minimum, there's no maximum that you need to subscribe for. The important part is that we have made it a rights issue, meaning that existing shareholders and owners of subscription rights will have priority in case of an oversubscription. We think this is important because you might recall our IPO back in 2018, where we saw an oversubscription of a factor 20, meaning 9,000 investors didn't get any shares. So we hope with this rights issue and the subscription rights that we can help our current shareholders and new investors to be part of the journey ahead. So this is kind of the quick story about Stenocare and the case. Very exciting market opportunity, a company with a strong track record and strong assets, and an offer to our shareholders and new investors that I hope they'll find very attractive. So that's kind of the quick version of the pitch.
Thank you, Thomas. It's already been quite an interesting journey you have been on, and I love your excitement about your product, and I think the first time we talked about your company 2 years ago, I think the two of us share the passion for this sector and the industry and what it can become. And one of the things that before we go into talking about the market as such, in the market prospects and where you see growth coming from, maybe we could start with the medical part of this, because I think it's important to stress that this is a pharma product. You are in the pharmaceutical industry. This is not recreational cannabis. This is not for fun. This is not something you put into your foods or your drinks. It's for medical purposes. Yeah. So you touched on where you can use the Stenocare's products, but where do you see you really, I'm sure you won't say it will cure COVID-19, which is on everybody's minds, but even on COVID-19, you have mentioned to me that is actually being used in the aftercare some places in or medical cannabis is being used in the aftercare for COVID-19 patients. What's the scope of the use of
it's actually very different by country.
Yeah.
So if you take Denmark as an example, the Danish medical cannabis program allows any doctor to prescribe medical cannabis to any sickness or illness that they find is relevant. So we don't have any limitations in Denmark. However, there's some recommendations on where you think it would be most meaningful. So in Denmark we have like multiple sclerosis. If you have nausea after having chemotherapy, if you have neural pain, chronic pains, so they are kind of the key focus in Denmark. If you take, for example, the UK or Ireland, their epilepsy is the key illness that they want to address with medical cannabis. If you take the US, where they have a lot of the veterans coming back with PTSD, they have ways of using medical cannabis for that. So by country, it's actually different, and this is why I showed the list in my presentation, that it's very different country by country, how far they have reached, what type of experiences they have. To my knowledge, there's more than 100 different tests going on around the globe. How to use, what is the impact, what does it mean for treatment, what are the side effects, what is the dosage, all that is ongoing. And then you are saying, well, what about the coronavirus, and has anyone done anything? And we should be careful because, first of all, we are not doctors, so we shouldn't be recommending anything for anyone. But I know, as an example, in Israel, there's a hospital that now is actually conducting a test with medical cannabis in the after treatment of COVID-19 patients. I don't know what they're using it for, and I think it's very early stage, but at least it's just saying that there's some ideas of how medical cannabis can be applied. And it's not like it's this wonder drug. It's because all the different illnesses have some similar indications, like pain, like nausea, like lack of sleep. So there's different things that all illnesses share, and this is what medical cannabis is actually addressing. Inflammatory conditions in your body is also one of them. So I think this is the way we should think about medical cannabis as far as I
know that you have often stressed that you are not interested in recreational cannabis at all, and I think we over the last couple of years have seen some pretty bad examples from the industry of companies who started out as working within medical cannabis and then try to venture into something that was a mixture or something like that.
Yeah.
But you're telling me that that's not going to happen in terms of Stenocare.
No, in Stenocare, we are 100% focused on medical and prescription-based, because there's also a gray zone where you can buy CBD, which is one of the cannabinoids in medical cannabis, that is used kind of as a health supplement.
Yeah.
We are not in that. We are purely in the prescription-based.
Yeah.
So I think that is important. And then you're saying, well, we've seen, especially in North America, there's been a high focus on the recreational, the fancy word for putting cannabis into gummy bears and drinks and, you know, sports bars and energy bars. And it really haven't taken off anyway like that they expected. So also the cannabis index in North America took a big drop over the last 18 months.
That's one thing in terms of the market conditions. Obviously, back in 2018, we saw a tremendous hype in the markets. The Canadian markets and Canadian companies really grew strongly on the Canadian stock exchanges, but the last year has been quite challenging.
Yeah. I mean, and again, there's actually two interesting points to what you're saying. So one of them is that it didn't happen. So they invested and they raised capital like there was no tomorrow, and they spent it.
Yeah,
that was a crazy spending of other people's money, and we sort of said, first of all, it's not going to happen in Europe because we don't see recreational happening in Europe anywhere. Everyone is talking about it, but it's not going to happen. So medical is the way to go. Second interesting part is, of course, that all the Canadian and North American, for that matter, because of this situation they're in now, they find it difficult to get more capital. They have high debt. So they're struggling in their own home market. So a year, 2 years ago, they were quite aggressively saying, we are entering Europe, we want to win Europe, and we're going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in Europe. And now they're struggling with their home market. So guess what? They're pulling back, or they're at least slowing down the investments that they were committing for Europe. So this is a sweet spot for Stenocare right now, because the guys that were supposed to be the big leading guys, they hurt.
They're indebted.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good situation to be in. Just in terms of the status, where are you now? Production facilities. What markets can you enter? What restrictions are there legally? What's the status?
So right now we are in a situation where we are working with the authorities to have our products approved. So we send in all the documentation required. That's a lot. And that takes the time it takes. And you don't really get a lot of status during that process. It's kind of you send it in, and then you wait for the authorities to come back and say yes or no. So we are on a good path to make that happen. And then we have our own production facility as well. And we started a year and a half ago investing in that, building an indoor kind of, it's not a clean room, but it's kind of a clean room facility because it's a closed building, and inside it's a closed room, and so we can really control all the elements. And that's coming along really, really nicely. So we had the first harvest, the number of harvests in the building, and we're creating our own genes of plants. So that is going to be the unique foundation for all products in the future, because every seed of medical cannabis is different. So you actually need to cultivate one specific seed, see what it goes, test it in a lab, go back and then clone that seed. And that's kind of a long and tiring process, but this is where the gold lies. And we are very far in that process now. So it's looking really, really great for this year to go to the next phase, which is kind of upgrading the facility, as I was talking about, and then having a production that we can have approved sometime next year with products from the authorities. And then the last thing you're saying, well, what happened with the laws and the opportunities in new markets? It's important to understand that each market in Europe will have their own set of rules. It's not harmonized. We think we're in EU and harmonization, not for medical cannabis. Each market is different. Each market, both for operating in it, getting operating licenses, for product approval. So that's kind of an asset you need to own to be able to successfully enter new markets.
If you take Denmark, which is it's not your home market, but you're based here, that you're headquartered here.
It is actually our home market.
And you can here in Denmark, we were I kind of feel we were late into the game, but then it changed very rapidly 2 years ago, and suddenly all doors were open for getting into
and you're saying it looked as if Denmark was late to the game. And then the Danish politicians, together with the Danish Medicine Agency, actually made the cannabis program that we have that turned out to be pretty unique for Europe. So now you see a lot of European countries that are thinking about legalizing coming to Denmark to learn, because it's actually being recognized as one of the most strict regulatory setups that is existing probably in the world. But it's also a program that kind of ensures very high compliance to regulations, patient safety. So everyone is looking at Denmark. And from a Stenocare point of view, having this as our kind of home base, this is where we grew up as a company under the strictest regulation available. That means whenever we go to a new country, people will be looking at it saying, oh, you're from Denmark? No problem. Yeah. You're a pharma country. We you know what this is.
I was about to ask that, because Denmark, of course, has a very strong pharma industry in general, and there's a very close relationship in the terms of how things are done from the authorities and from the pharmaceutical companies. So we kind of used to how the rules apply.
Yes.
And do you feel that makes it easier to operate from a Danish, being headquartered here?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we hear this over and over again when we talk to new potential markets. I mean, the first we had was, of course, Ireland. Yeah. And they felt that the Danish regulation was really, really advanced and very solid and well documented. So they felt safe working with Stenocare and introducing and allowing Stenocare to be part of the market. And we've actually had contacts from other countries that are thinking about legalizing, calling Stenocare, hey, say, you're one of the guys that actually had products in the market that is compliant with the regulatory requirements. So can you share that with us? And are you even interested in being part of an early phase in our country, in our market? And that, of course, only is a possibility because we're working out of Denmark. So that's when I say we had all these assets, that is our foundation. The regulatory asset is something that we have. And then let's compare to the Canadians and the North Americans that has been investing millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to enter the European market. I think they have been surprised how difficult it is. How they thought, we know what cannabis is about. We've done this for years.
It's just copy paste.
Problem is they did it back home where they came from, and they didn't do it in a pharma setting like we do in Europe. So again, we will have a competitive advantage over those guys, and we've seen that.
I should just say to the viewers who are watching us that this is a recorded webinar, so you can't ask questions while we're talking, but we will get back to you. Thomas, you promised to, if there's anything I don't ask about, please write some questions below, and you will get back to the audience with some replies.
Yeah, we'll be happy to.
You said country number 2 is Ireland. Why Ireland?
Yeah, but
other than it's green.
yeah. I mean, it was actually the Irish authorities that came to us. So they were on a mission or on a trip to Denmark to learn about the Danish cannabis program. Of course, they were meeting with different companies and, of course, the authorities. And we had the first conversation and meeting with the Irish health authorities back then. And we were talking, well, could you consider bringing your products to Ireland, because they were in the Danish market and they looked as if they were interesting. So that was actually a starting point. Mm-hmm. So we hadn't even identified Ireland at that point because we thought it was a bit too early for us to start the international expansion, because the original plan we had was international expansion would start in 2021-ish. And then suddenly in 2019, we were in Ireland, I mean, a year and a half ahead of our plans. But then, as you know, when opportunity is there, you need to grab them and work with it. So that was why we choose Ireland. But then Ireland is you could say, well, was that just a crazy match? No, because the way we look at Europe, we have sort of put countries into 3 different segments. Everyone is saying Germany, UK, France, because they are the big markets, and that's the holy grail of a market you need to be in. And certainly the Canadians all wanted to be in
Germany. Yeah.
And we early identified it, okay, so if you're familiar with the blue ocean and the red ocean, where the red ocean is where everyone is fighting to the death and there's blood all over, that's why the red ocean. We sort of agreed, we don't want to be swimming around in that red ocean because everyone else is killing each other. So we are looking for the blue ocean countries. And those are the smaller countries around, because it takes the same amount of effort regulatory-wise and approval-wise to get into a country. But then the big guys say, well, we don't have resources. We don't understand all these languages and cultural differences that you have in Europe. But that's kind of being a Dane. I mean,
that's we used to.
I mean, we are the traders of this continent.
And I know from your business background, you have not been doing anything else your entire career.
Myself and my co-founders, this is what we have been doing our entire life, is establishing new businesses around Europe, working with the local authorities, understanding local culture, building a scalable model that works. This is something we have.
Do you find that the approach to this is very different from different countries? How big are take Denmark and Ireland? How large are the differences in the regulatory framework and the?
I mean, the regulatory framework is not that different. However, for example, when we went to Ireland, we weren't required to seek all the same types of licenses that takes easily 6 to 12 months in Denmark. Because they were saying, well, if you're already up and running and operating in another country approved in Europe, that's actually good enough for us. Because then we know you are being controlled, you're being compliant, you know your documentation. So everything that is kind of expected, sort of page 1 in the pharma book of how to do things. Yeah. They expected that to be the case because the Danish Medicine Agency is controlling everything we do. Yeah. We get inspections where they come and spend several days and really look at all our paperwork, look at all our processes, and interview the entire team on how do you do things and so on. So we are really, really regulated. So that means that was one way that Ireland looked at it. In Germany, they have some other parameters that they think is important for them, some certifications you need to have, some different processes that you need to follow. So by country, you need to understand that. Yeah. But I mean, the beauty of building Stenocare from the ground up in Denmark is that all the operating procedures that we have, I mean, it's very unusual for a young company to have all processes fully documented in big binders, so you know exactly when you do that, how you do it, how you sign in, how you sign out, everything. So we have documented the entire business process, and we have been reviewed on it several times by the authorities. And that is something we can copy-paste to other markets, and that makes us pretty unique in the way that we attack the market opportunity in front of us.
One thing that this leads us to is what I would see as a major challenge normally in the pharmaceutical industry, our time perspective, our time horizon is very, very long. The research and development process is long. The approval process is long. Taking it to marketing is very, very long. Yeah. But we are also in this kind of emerging market where there is no legislation, or suddenly a country opens up. You have a new parliament majority in a country that says we need to have this, we need to do this, and then the opportunity is there. How do we manage those two things that I see as very, very different? Is that part of your partnerships you have, and how do you navigate in that environment?
So you're actually right that compared to the traditional pharma industry, where you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Takes forever, years and years and years, and billions of of Danish kroner to complete that process. You don't have that in the medical cannabis industry. I mean, you could ideally, last time we had products approved from zero to completion, that was a 6-month period of time.
Yeah.
You've never seen that in the traditional.
No.
So there's an opportunity to bring products to market much, much faster in the medical cannabis legalization. So that's one part of it. That makes this interesting because we don't see the very long period of time that it takes. However, you're saying, well, what about your partnerships? Are they also an asset? And they are, because we are working with the leading medical cannabis producers in, for example, Israel. They are the largest medical cannabis supplier in Israel. They actually even have phase 1, phase 2 studies with their products right now. So eventually they might actually come out with a phase 3 and fully approved product. But in the meantime, they understand the European pharma industry. They understand the requirements. They understand the need for documentation and uniformity and all that important elements of a prescription-based product.
Do you see that as something that is happening? And I think you hinted at that as a competitive advantage, that this is not a Wild West sector. Well,
No.
Part of it might have been,
but
as you said, the survival in this industry really necessitate you act as a pharma company rather than as a Wild West company.
You won't get away with kind of being not following all the guidelines, the rules, being 100% compliant, having everything in documenting in order. If you don't have that, you're out of business.
Yeah.
So that is the starting point. And we see this as something that is good for the market. It's good for the patients because that means safety for the drugs that they get from their doctors. So I think it's all good.
Does that also mean that you need to take in more resources? I think thinking human capital wise, people who come from the pharma industry rather than entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the Danish regulation actually require us to hire people with a certain education, with a certain pharma experience, and I mean, very prescriptive CVs is actually presented to us saying, if you want to be serious, if you want to be approved by the authorities, you need this type of person, you need this type of person, and there's even a minimum of how much they need to work with us, and so on. So of course we have hired some of the best guys, because I'm not a pharmacist, I'm not a doctor, I'm something different. But then the team that we have built has all those skills, and that is actually a regulatory requirement that we have. And so we are basically just building on that right now, because we actually managed to build a very strong leadership team based on those requirements from the authorities.
The medical cannabis industry is very, very, it's in the infancy still, and in many European countries we don't even have the legal improvements that ensure we can enter the market. But if we want to talk about the long-term growth perspective, Thomas, if you look ahead 10-15 years, because as an investor that's really what's interesting. What's happening next year is not that interesting. Well, but what's the prospect for the next 10-15 years? I know you don't give revenue guidance, but if you wanna give some guidance on where you see the market overall in Europe, what growth rate are we talking about? What's the size of the market? Let's say in 5 years or in 10 years.
I mean, in 4 years, the analyst that is looking at this market say it'll be a market size of 2.2 billion euros.
And now we're down in the millions of euros.
In the millions. It's not a big market today. So that is quite a significant acceleration just in the next 4 years. So where does it go next? I mean, the most optimistic forecast from the analysts is that most European countries will be legalized. And if that is the case, we're looking at a population of almost 700 million people.
Yeah.
And if you compare that, we can compare it to Canada. Canada is like eight years ahead of us right now. And they're like 36 million Canadians. So Europe is going to be a factor 20.
Yeah.
Okay. So and the market that we have or we see in Canada right now, they are at a market of I think it's 12 billion Danish kroner. So if you take 12 billion and multiply that by 20, that was the factor between the population of Canada and Europe. That gives you sort of, what was it, 12 times 20, that's 250 million, a billion, sorry, 250 billion. That could be the potential market if we copy-paste the usage pattern from the Canadian market. So now it's me just doing some calculation.
Yeah.
This is not something we put into our prospectus. It's not something that we say this is going to happen. But that is just giving an idea of this is a really, really exciting industry.
I think the interesting thing here is that we actually in North America, both in the US and particularly in Canada, have a fairly well-established market, and patients who are using medical cannabis products, and have been doing so for years. But it's also a very different market, isn't it, in terms of the legal framework?
I mean, you're right, because in Canada, the way it works, you get a prescription from your doctor, and then you take that prescription and you can actually go shopping directly with the manufacturers. You don't have to go to a pharmacy and so on. In Denmark and in other European countries, we sort of have the doctors writing the prescription every single time. So we have right now a model that is a bit slower in sort of getting the patients to the point of purchasing the medical cannabis. But I mean, that is I think that's just a process. Because at the end of the day, we should look at the opportunities or the potential usage. So who's going to benefit from medical cannabis? That's the real question. How many people could benefit getting a better quality of life? And that's where we see in Canada right now, 400,000 patients are using it every single day in Canada. And that is the 12 billion I was talking about in Danish kroner. So if we sort of take that pattern and put that over the European market, then however way you get to the point of actually getting the prescription and getting medical cannabis in your hands is kind of just a process.
I have been over the last couple of years been looking at the numbers again and again, and I'm not in the business of giving investment advice on this, but obviously you can see the potential here just looking at what we see in North America. But what countries are next? If you look at the big countries, everybody's talking Germany. Yeah, and that's because of the size of Germany and because of that there is actually a fairly open medical cannabis market there now. Yeah. But what about the other large ones in Europe? The UK, France, Spain, Italy. Where are we there?
I mean, we have a pipeline of countries that we're looking at and evaluating right now. I mean, and we don't say
don't
too
necessarily
much. We don't necessarily share the names because we don't want competition to get some good ideas. However, I would be surprised if Germany is very high on that list. So because, as I was saying, we see that as a red ocean. Yeah. So we'll probably go for some other markets, or even some of the early adapter countries that is just about to legalize, sort of, or will legalize in the next 6 months or a year. We might actually start investing in that as part of this share issue that we are now in the market, because it will give us an opportunity to get an early foothold. And an early foothold means knowledge about Stenocare and our products, meaning we're building a brand, and that's the goal of Stenocare 2.0. We want to be a leading European brand, because once you're a brand where people think medical cannabis, they should think Stenocare.
Yeah. So, Thomas, we've already talked for nearly an hour, and both of us are passionate about this, so we could go on and on and on. And I should repeat,
absolutely.
I think we're happy to do once more, but please, to the viewers, write your questions and you will get back. Yes. But one thing I'm thinking about, Thomas, you're based in Denmark, headquartered here. How much in terms of entering new markets? what would that require in terms of getting companies established, hiring people around Europe? How much can be done out of Denmark? How much can be shipped from here? Do you need to have production in other countries and so forth?
Yeah, so I was saying that we segment the countries into 3 different groups. So we sort of have the early adopters, we have sort of the core markets like Denmark, and then we have sort of the high potential markets like Germany, UK, France. And for each of those 3 segments, we have a different approach. So if we take sort of the early adapters that it might legalize in 6-8 months time from now, we might go in through a partnership model. So we don't invest in organization people, and we won't have kind of a localization in that, because we need to keep the costs down, so the prices of the products don't go up too high. And when we take the core markets, there we will establish ourselves. We might even have a production facility, if that makes sense. And then the last segment, like the Germany, the France, and the UK, we will of course be establishing ourselves there. We think there will be a huge price pressure in those markets. There will be huge competition because the big guys from Canada still want to be in those markets. So we need to have a low cost model. And again, there we might actually work through partners.
How do you see partners? Is that within the traditional pharma industry, or is it new players?
No. So for us, it'll be traditional pharma players, because for us, we want to be a pharma company. We're not a farmer, meaning. So we're the guy that's working with a pharmaceutical approach. And therefore, the partners that we work with need to be well-established, well-proven companies in this industry, because they know what it means to be compliant. They have all the right licenses to operate, all that important stuff. That is sort of the starting point, basically, for our business. Fantastic,
Thomas. As I said, we could go on and on and on, but we have to stop. But Thomas, if you are an investor somewhere in the world, you're interested in this, what are the conditions to invest? When can you invest, and when can you participate in the rights issue? What's the time frame here?
Yeah, so the time frame is that right now we are in the middle of the subscription period. So any investor or existing shareholder, they can go and sign up for a subscription of the shares they like. That ends June 11 at 5 o'clock Danish time. So that's the deadline, June 11. And between now and June 11, everyone can go into from their own bank and submit a subscription form, and hopefully be one of the new shareholders of Stenocare.
Very interesting, Thomas. You might get to more than 5,000 owners very soon. I wish you the best of luck. It has been a great talking to you about this. And again, just to repeat, any questions, Thomas is happy to answer them, and the Stenocare team. So, and thanks to Nordnet for hosting us. And we will be back soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.